Hey guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is all about, should you get the CRC, or the Certified Risk Adjustment Coder credential from the American Academy of Professional Coders? Some things to think about. If you're brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue. I'm a medical coder. Okay guys, so what gets me is when I get messages from people that say, oh, I watch your show all the time, and what do you think if I got this credential? What do you think if I got that credential? There are only 4 that I recommend. 4. And especially for my brand new medical coders, all you need is 1. Okay? Because I'm about 2 things. Not wasting time and not wasting money. And when you're brand new in this industry, there's this is a business, okay? Health information is a business. So there's a lot of places that are willing to sell you products, and they're willing to sell you a dream and a lifestyle and say, oh, this is what you need in order to make more money. This is what you need in order to do all these things. When in fact, a lot of the times you will find out all you need is 1. All you need is 1 medical coding certification. The CCS, that is the gold standard of medical coding credentials. The CCA, that's a Certified Coding Associate. The CCSP, the Certified Coding Specialist Physician based. These 3 are all with the American Health Information Management Association, or the AAPC CPC certification, the Certified Professional Coder. Now, any one of these 4 will get you in the door, okay? I will tell you what all these other people that are trying to sell things to you are not going to tell you, which is, even though you have a long conga line of credentials after your name, if you do not have the experience to back it up, it does not mean a hill of beans. Now, if your employer wants you to get a certain certification and they pay for it, by all means. But you should not be going out there trying to collect all these willy-nilly, okay? You need to stop and think about which way you want to go. And I always tell brand new people, if you just start with 1 for at least the first 2 years, you will be able to get your boots on the ground. You'll be able to get a lay of the land and understand what's actually happening before you start tacking on other credentials or whatever, what have you, or going back and getting your degree. I will tell you that this industry gets very expensive very fast. And a lot of times people are wasting their money doing things that all you needed to do was just be patient, okay? But I'm going to read this message. And guys, if you're going to send me a message, make sure that you're going through my videos and looking, because I say it all the time. I feel like I say it in almost every episode, right? That you only need 1 of the 4, the CCS, CCA, CCSP, or CPC, okay? Now, I'm with AHIMA all the way. I'm certified. I have the CCSP and I have the CCS. I still talk about AAPC anyway, because this is what the industry is looking for, either AHIMA or AAPC credentials. A lot of people are dual certified through both. It's unnecessary, really, because all you need is 1 association, okay? It's more money, yet again, for you to have certifications through both. But again, people are going to choose whichever path that they want to. But I'm telling you that you don't have to. All you need to do is just pick 1. A lot of people are going through unnecessary stress at the beginning of their careers because they're listening to everybody that's trying to sell them a product. So here's a message. Hi, Blue. I just turned 39. LOL. And I'm wanting to get my certification in CRC. In your opinion, is the certification a good one to start with? Would you recommend something else first? And if I were to go with the CRC or any other certification, would you recommend me taking the full course prior to the exam or just studying for the exam? I have a strong background in healthcare, over 10 years, from checking in and checking out to scheduling, to prior authorizations, insurance, and some ICD/CPT. I am open to all opinions and suggestions, not afraid of any criticism or anything. Your videos are so helpful and motivating to keep going and learning. Were you listening? Were you listening in any of those videos where I said all you need is 1? that you don't have to start out with these specialty certifications. Okay, that's just my opinion. Okay, there's going to be somebody that gets upset with this video and saying, oh, Blue, you're so mean, and I got the CRC and I'm doing great with it. That's fantastic for you. That's fantastic for you. If you look at the job descriptions, though, you will see that on a lot of the job descriptions, it says, especially if they're for risk adjustment coders, it says candidate must have CCS, CCA, CCSP, or CPC with the CRC preferred. Now, why do they say CRC preferred? Are they going to give you extra money for having a CRC? No. They're going to start you at whatever they start everybody else at. Okay? The CRC just means that you passed a test. Now, what is on the CRC? So I will read to you from the website, from the APC website, where it says the breaking down is a 100-question exam, right? You need a 70 to pass, which means that you can miss 30 and still pass the test. So here's the thing. The breaking down of the CRC exam requires you to correctly answer a minimum of 70 questions from the domains below. The exam will rely on a level of understanding that enables you to identify the domain. Compliance, 15 questions. These questions will assess your knowledge of the process for prospective audits, from RADV audits and for retrospective audits, and your ability to identify common coding errors identified in RADV audits. Diagnosis coding, 30 questions, okay? Because that's the bulk of what this test is diagnosis coding, right? These questions will assess your ability to apply coding clinic guidance to coding scenarios and identify common coding errors in risk adjustment, as well as diagnosis codes that risk adjust. Additionally, you must demonstrate the ability to properly code amputations, artificial openings, atherosclerosis, AV fistulas, CHF, CKD, complications of devices, COPD, CVA, stroke, dementia, depression, DVT, hypertension, malnutrition, manifestations of diseases, mental disorders, neoplasms, pneumonia, pressure ulcers, pulmonary embolism, pulmonary fibrosis, seizures, and skin ulcers. Documentation improvement, 12 questions. This section will test your knowledge on communicating documentation discrepancies with providers and your ability to identify documentation discrepancies. Pathophysiology and medical terminology and anatomy. Only 5 questions. Do you know that having a strong background in pathophysiology, medical terminology, and anatomy is critical to risk adjustment coding? When you're doing risk adjustment coding, do you understand what it is? It is a collection of data, right? You're going through a person's chart. And the one who started this all was Medicare, of course. Medicare has to be able to manage the funds for Medicare into perpetuity, which means forever. And the only way they're going to be able to do that is to make sure that they're managing the money. They can project and plan for the future and how much it's going to cost. So what they started to do was go through the records and see, okay, this person has, let's just say, for example, diabetes. Okay, well, if they have diabetes, then a lot of them have also like high cholesterol. And so they start looking at that. Then they start looking at chronic kidney disease and all the things that are common with chronic kidney disease. So how much is it going to take to care for this person and their health care forever? So they can start to do their algorithm and figure that stuff out. In order to be able to get good data, you have to understand the pathophysiology of these conditions, right? You have to understand what is a symptom and what is part of, the whole process, either because they have this other condition or they have this other condition, or is this other thing, is it separate? Does this symptom go with this? I've had people before, when I very first started the channel, back then, there was no CRC. There was no CRC back then. And back then, for risk adjustment coders, you didn't even have to be certified. You didn't even have to have one of the 4 main medical coding certifications, let alone a CRC. You didn't have to have any of that. I used to recommend people get into CRC so that they can at least try it out. Because at least that way they can kind of start understanding like the process of looking at diagnosis codes and figuring it out and what to pull and what not to pull. And so that's one of the things that you have to know, is that you have to understand those things. I would get questions from people. These were basic pathophysiology questions. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why don't you know this? Oh, well, I just got this job, but I don't really understand. You need to go back to the book. You need to go back to the book and you need to study again. You know, a lot of people get upset with me because I say, got to go back to the book. You got to study again. Pathophysiology, anatomy, medical terminology. But why? Do you know what industry you're in? We have to know what doctors know while never having gone to medical school. I say that all the time. That's my saying, okay? We have to know what doctors know while never having gone to medical school. Not to scare you, certainly not. But it is to prepare you. Because if you are not prepared, the industry will recognize that you are not prepared. Will you have as much opportunity? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And the thing about risk adjustment is that it's just diagnosis coding. So once you start to understand like this condition going with this, and then the combination codes for certain conditions, right? Hypertension and chronic kidney disease, those always go together, okay? But those are the things that you're going to have to recognize. It's going to start getting real repetitive. And it gets really boring really fast. That's not my words. That's not my words. That's coming from people who have written me. You have to remember, I have an organic channel, right? Which means all of my subscribers, currently 46,000 subscribers, 46,000 plus, they're all mine. I didn't pay for not one of them, okay? And so because of this, these are all genuine people that are subscribing to my channel. They're the one asking me these questions. And so again, this is why I say, or they're making the comments that it's getting boring. Yes, because all you're doing is diagnosis coding. And the other bad thing about just doing risk adjustment diagnosis coding is that you start to lose your skill in CPT. You start to lose your skill if you have ICD-10 PCS training. You start to lose that as well. So if you're losing that, guess what happens 4 years down the road? Because a lot of people write me, they're 4 years in to risk adjustment. They're like, Blue, I'm scared and I want to move on. Are you studying CPT? Are you studying ICD-10 PCS if that's what you knew before? No. So how do you expect to get out? Because yes, while employers say they want 3 to 5 years experience, they expect that 3 to 5 years experience to be in ICD-10-CM, CPT, HCPCS, ICD-10 PCS if you have that. If it is only in ICD-10-CM, which is what risk adjustment coding is, I have seen job ads that say this does not count as experience because it's just diagnosis coding. You don't remember how to level. And a lot of people, like I said, they'll stop. Once they get a job, they're so relieved, they stop studying and they don't move on from there. So it makes it very difficult. So if you want to limit the possibilities of work you can have, if you are okay with just diagnosis coding, then by all means. If you want to get one of the 4 main medical coding certifications and just do risk adjustment coding or HCC coding, you're going to be just fine. But if you really want to take it to the next level with the potential that you would have in this industry, if you were actually applying yourself all the way instead of doing this Mickey Mouse, barely wanting to, I want to start with HCC first. I want to start with diagnosis coding first. You have no idea what you're talking about. And it's going to be harder for you to adjust later on because you're so used to one thing. It's very hard to break the habit and start something new. So, but they only have 5 questions on here for that, right? This section will assess your ability to identify common acronyms for the industry and medical terminology and identify anatomic structures, locations, and functions. You also will be asked to define common medical terms and explain disease processes and interactions for common chronic conditions. Okay, I was a little nervous there. Purpose and use of risk adjustment models, 10 questions, but more about that, right? This section will ask that you explain the use of data mining and predictive modeling from the data captured through risk adjustment coding. You must also demonstrate the ability to apply trumping in the risk adjustment hierarchy. Quality of care, 3 questions. This area will test your ability to explain the purpose of HEDIS and STAR ratings, as well as their alignment with risk adjustment. Risk adjustment models, 15 questions. This section will assess your ability to apply ACA, CDPS, HCC, and private payer risk adjustment models. You will also be asked to list the elements needed to determine the risk adjustment score. Cases, 10 cases. Each case will test your ability to accurately assign diagnoses based on the medical record documentation and report diagnoses that risk adjust. So as I've said, if you want to start your career in risk adjustment, because some people have found that it's a little bit easier to get a job when you very first start out in risk adjustment, I've always said to stay a very short stay, like less than 6 months. 6 months, don't try not to go past 6 months, okay? Because again, like I say, people get stuck there for years and then they don't know how to get themselves out of it. You know, which I think is a very simple answer, which is you go back to studying again. And yes, while your experience may have only been risk adjustment, let's look at all the things you did and let's just try to highlight some of those skills. Because you can say that, yes, you have experience when you get tested, because the employer will give you an assessment test. When you get tested, that's when you can show that, yes, you still understand CPT coding. You still understand how to level out evaluation and management. You still know how to apply modifiers. You still know what the difference is between the modifiers that go on E&M and the modifiers that go on procedures. So that's where you can help yourself, you know. But like I say, and I even told this lady, I said, you know, if you want to start out with risk adjustment only, you know, the CRC certification, you're going to limit yourself. Because, again, it's just diagnosis coding. There's no arguing with that. There's no arguing. You may not like what I say about the risk adjustment credential, the CRC. You may not like it. It doesn't matter, does it? Because the truth of it is that all you're doing is diagnosis coding, which if you're already with AAPC, the CPC does test you on diagnosis coding, not a lot, but those diagnosis codes are also in the CPT scenarios and things like that. So it's all blended in, okay? You all need to stop trying to compartmentalize your learning when it comes to this. You need to be open enough to say, okay, well, I may not be strong in CPT, but I'm going to have to learn it because that's what I want to do. That's how I want to be able to get my career going. And you know, when people dangle the salary in front of people, and that's the reason that I flat refuse to talk about money and specifics on my channel, because a lot of people are already selling the field of medical coding based on the salary. Salary is fantastic, and if you disagree, well, that's your issue. But a lot of people, again, they're getting that salary dangled in front of their face, and that's why they're going for it. And they're trying to get into this for the wrong reasons. What happens is when you do something like this and you get these people in and they're unhappy, well, then they're going to be unhappy for their entire career because it wasn't what they thought. And now they feel like they're stuck, rather than seeing it for what it is. Like, okay, you can tell the people about all the great things, but you also need to emphasize that there are things that they're going to have to work for. That high salary you're going to have to work for, because it's not going to be given to you right out of the gate, okay? Working at home remotely, that's another one. Oh, no, Blue, I work remotely right out of the gate, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but you're missing out on the development of a coder, right? Completely. Because even though, yes, you may start off working at home, guess what you may be missing out on? The mentorship that you can get with people that are around you. It is so different being online and working with others and things like that, and exchanging messages, versus being in person, where you can have that time to develop and grow, and you can have ideas to bounce off of other people and things like that. So that's the thing that you're missing out on. I don't want people to miss out. I want them to be prepared. It's not always going to be, I'm not going to always say it in the way that you want it to be, because there's too much sugarcoating. There's a lot of sugarcoating in the industry, right? Because again, if you told people how hard they had to work, there would be a lot of people that wouldn't even sign up for those programs because it's too hard. And that's just baloney. Like, how do you think something is so hard that you can't do it? You absolutely can. You can. But it's all a mindset. It's all about what you want to do, and it's all about how you handle like all the things that come your way. And if you want to sit here and be real gingerly and say, oh, I want to start with only diagnosis coding, rather than building your knowledge all at the same time, so that you can start and you can get going. Because trust me, after those 90 days when you start in a new job, right, and you're learning about diagnosis coding and procedure coding and modifiers and E&M, you're learning about all those things in the first 90 days. Guess what happens after those 90 days? You start to become more confident, right? You start to become more confident. And all of this holding yourself back and only starting in risk adjustment just so that I can get going, you're going to limit your opportunities. Okay? Now get the CRC if you want to get it. You know, I'm not going to say either way. But what I do say, though, is you need to consider it carefully. And don't get it just because you think it's going to give you more money. Because when you look at the job listings for risk adjustment coders, they're often asking for the CCS, the CCA, the CCSP, or the CPC. And they always say preferred. And a lot of people don't understand that preferred does not mean required. It's just like when people see recommend on the AHIMA website, they interpret that as you have to have experience. When they say that they recommend 2 years of experience in coding before you sit for the CCS, recommend does not mean required. You do not have to have experience to sit for the CCS. Because AHIMA, again, is a nonprofit organization, but they do have credentials to sell, okay? And they will allow you to take the test. And again, all you need to do is make sure that you study and that you are prepared, because the CCS is the gold standard. Everyone asks for it, yes, because this says that the person has mastered inpatient coding and outpatient coding. And there's a difference, you know, but again, it depends on what the employer is asking for, and it depends on why. A person who has a CCS is going to be able to do inpatient coding and outpatient coding. Not the focus of this video, but I'm just saying. You know, and so that's what you need to look at. You need to look at the descriptions of the credentials and see what they are saying. And sometimes people will want to start off with the CRC, you know, just because they feel like it's going to be easier. It's not. People fail this exam all the time too. Okay? It's very easy to fail these exams, especially if you go in with, you know, an arrogant attitude and, you know, oh, that you can do this, and you haven't put in any time to study. It'll show. It definitely will show. Although there are some people who just naturally do well at guessing at tests, you know, but it won't get any easier when you're on the outside. Because when you're on the outside, they will be looking at your knowledge. They will be giving you those assessment tests, okay? And there's really no way to prepare for those assessment tests. You can try, but there's no test prep booklet, you know, because a lot of people think that if there's like a test prep booklet that would help them. It won't, because the test prep is only just to prepare you for what potential questions may be. You understand and you know the domains, but it's just a test prep. It's not meant to be like this is what's on the test, because then people would just memorize and there would be no way to gauge intelligence or knowledge. I'm just saying. So with that said, doesn't matter your age. I kind of look at the screen when I read the age was 39, like really? They put LOL, you know, like a lot of times when I see something like that, it's with people, they think they're too old at 39, which is ridiculous because that's still so incredibly young. Even in your 50s is still young, because when you think about like the retirement age, it's in the 70s, and that's a long ways away. You know, if you quit harping on your age is what I want to close this video out with. Quit harping on your age. It's just, it's foolish. People go back to school all the time at all ages and stages, and they're able to start their new careers. And I've always said, I went to school with a lady who was age 61. She's still a coder today. I've been a coder for 17 years, you know, and she's still going because she's sharp, you know, she's still very sharp. And if you're sharp, that you're incredibly blessed, you know, to be in this industry as long and to be as sharp. I'm just saying. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. But yes, guys, It is up to you. If you ask me a question like this, I'm going to ask you to think about it. Okay? Because like I said, I'm not here to sell credentials either way. And I've always said the 4 that I recommend, and the CRC is not one of them, because like I said, employers are looking for the CCS, CCA, CCSP, or the CPC. That's what employers are looking for. When it comes to the specialty credentials, like any of the other ones like CDIP, those are when you are doing something specialized, but of course you need experience for that. Okay? But like I said, choose carefully, because people will sell you whatever they put in front of you. They will sell it to you, and they will sell you a whole dream along with it. Okay, whether it is salary bump or whatever. The only way you're going to be able to get that is by having the knowledge. If you don't have the knowledge, you're not going to get it anywhere. I'm just saying. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you guys so much for joining me. If this video helped you, please like, subscribe, and share. And I'll see y'all next time. Bye.